everyone, and welcome to this week's podcast broadcast of This Week in Science, also TWIS. We call it TWIS, TWIS, This Week in Science. Acronyms, they're great. Many people use them. We're going to do a show right now. Justin's not here because he has a lot going on. Blair also has a lot going on. We may see some of that happening during the show. We may not. We will all be entertained. That is all that I will say. But now is the time for the science. This is all live. And if there is anything that needs to be edited out, our wonderful editor, Rachel, will take the stuff out for the podcast that you can subscribe to. So you don't have to deal with this first part stuff and the problem stuff and the after show stuff. But if you like all that stuff, we're glad you're here. We're glad you're watching. And Blair, are you ready for us to do a show?
Yes.
Great. Oh, I hear you. That's perfect. I always have to do the double check on the volume before we get started.
Oh, yes, of course. No, we're ready. I have swallowed my water. We are good to go.
Okay. Share, like, subscribe, algorithm us up so that we end up on like whatever. I don't know. We're not on it's not 808 week for us for like Twitch DJs, but you know, podcasts, whatever. Let's put us on the front page, kids. Let's go. Let's start this show in 3, 2. This is TWIS. This Week in Science, episode number 982, recorded on Wednesday, August 14th, 2024. Is this a Mayo-Science fusion podcast? Could be. I'm Dr. Kiki, and tonight we will fill your heads with drilling, smarts, and music. But first, disclaimer. This podcast was not created by an algorithm. The hosts of this podcast are real human beings. The voices, images, and opinions of the hosts come from them and have not been generated in any way by complex association matrices made to seem intelligent when in fact they are not. The hosts of this podcast have lived unique lives, learned multitudes, could be polymaths. We'll see about that. Embrace uncertainty and curiosity and are excited to share interesting findings, questions, and conversations with you on This Week in Science. Coming up next.
I've got the kind of mind that can't get enough. I want to learn everything. I want to fill it all up with new discoveries that happen every day of the week. There's only one place to go to find the knowledge I seek. I want to know what's happening. What's happening? What's happening this week in science? What's happening? What's happening? What's happening this week in science?
Good science to you, Kiki.
Good science to you too, Blair, and everyone out there. Welcome to this week's episode of This Week in Science. We are back once again to talk about all sorts of science stories that we thought were fun and interesting and share them with you and see what you have to say. We love getting your comments when you're in our chat rooms and when you send us the emails. We do have a great show ahead. Thank you so much for joining us. I have news stories about the crust, lasers, mayonnaise, some hearing heat, maybe shifting values, how music helps, and maybe a memory mechanism. I don't know. We'll see. Blair, what did you bring for the animal corner?
Well, speaking of memory mechanisms, I didn't remember to bring more than 2 stories tonight. So I brought horses and lemurs.
Those are good animals to bring. I mean, if you're going to bring anything to a science party, I think horses and lemurs are a good choice.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Especially those little ponies where you can go around and around inside of the little... Never mind. Yes. Everyone, If you are not yet subscribed to This Week in Science, please head over to, I don't know, wherever you find a podcast. Look for This Week in Science. Subscribe, share us with friends. We also do this live stream of the podcast, which, is live on video on YouTube and Facebook and Twitch, 8 p.m. Pacific time-ish every Wednesday evening. And, you can subscribe and get notifications and share all that kind of stuff. But if all this is a lot, just head to twis.org, where we have show notes, recordings of the podcast, and all sorts of fun things for you to try to make your life easier when it comes to us. But now it's time for the science.
Yeah, give me it.
Okay, I will hand it to you. I would give you the science right now. All right. So Justin's not here tonight, so this is all me right now. This last week, researchers working at a very special area of the Earth's crust. A team from Cardiff University in the UK. They started several years ago. They figured they were going to dig into the Earth's crust in the Atlantic Ocean at this little location, mid-Atlantic ridge, this place called Atlantis Massif. And where they were drilling, is kind of close to where two tectonic plates come together. So the idea is that if we drill and pull out this crusty material, eventually we'll get down to deeper material that might be more impacted by the heat and elements within the mantle. So to date, we really have not cracked through the crust of the Earth. We've got some efforts. People are drilling, trying to go super deep. The crust is thick. It's hard to drill as deep as the crust is. Our Earth is big. We forget about that when we travel around the world in airplanes and use the internet. But they were just going to drill a shallow hole. So a researcher involved from the University of Delaware, Kwan Yu Lin, says the original plan was to drill a shallow hole around 200 meters. But to our surprise, the hole just kept going deeper and deeper, with extremely high recovery rates that were never seen before when drilling these types of rocks. Stunned by what we were seeing, the science party, just like here on TWIS, agreed to change the plan and to keep deepening the hole. And so they've been publishing through the years. And we actually spoke with a science communicator a while back who had been involved in some of these missions out to the area called the Lost City Hydrothermic Fields. And so this hole that they've been digging, hole U1601C, has really provided an opportunity to study what's going on deeper and deeper and deeper into the crust. So how deep did they go? They got this hole to extend a record 1,268 meters, and they were able to recover, and this is the interesting part, not everything is recoverable. So some of it breaks apart, some of it gets lost in the ocean on the way back up, some of it gets contaminated. They recovered 71% of their core sample of 1,268 meters. The sample has an element or a molecule compound called periodite. This is igneous rock, and it's made up of pyroxene and olivine. And what they saw through the depth and the changing of the depth of this core that they sampled is that there was what they call serpentining that happened. So this is a changing in the structure of these compounds, olivine and pyroxene, into new minerals that where there are hydrocarbons involved. And so as it got deeper and deeper, or the seawater was intruding and the heat was coming up and possibly changing it as well, there was a lot of peridotite being transformed, and there was a lot of seawater penetration, and it suggests that there's a great opportunity for microscopic life to exist at very deep depths beneath the surface of the Atlantic seafloor. So it's a very interesting, fun study, because this is a different environment, a hydrothermal environment, where the researchers are able to get into, these depths that have never been reached before. And I love the idea that they were just going to go to, 200 meters or so. And then they're like, oh, this is really good. Let's go deeper. That would be cool.
So you said 1,200 is how deep they ended up going?
Yes. So they ended up going
so far,
12.
And they're still going?
Yeah. So they're still going. And they say it's, this isn't getting to the mantle anytime soon, but because they're at this place where the tectonic plates come together, the magma is upwelling. And so there is a little bit more mixing. There's an alteration of the crust material by the heat and by and so there's really, this is getting at like the transition layers. We're getting towards the boundaries of the rock that is solid to the rock that is being transformed, and then the rock that becomes more liquid, right?
Wow. The mantle is upwelling. That's wild. It makes sense, but it's funny to think about. Well, especially because, I don't know, like when I think about watching Bill Nye as a kid and them talking about the crust and the mantle, you always picture just kind of these thin layers floating on top of liquid, which is what's happening here. But I really appreciate the numbers that you can add to it that say, yeah, it's like a relatively thin piece compared to the rest of the depth of the entire planet to the core, but we're still going 1,200 meters. So that's like 3,600 feet.
It's over 4,000 feet. Yeah.
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 So it's so far, and it's not even to the mantle yet.
But if you think about how tectonic plates work, so you have some that are subducted, and so where one is going underneath another, and so material from the crust is being pushed down into the mantle, and then you have other zones that are uplift, and so you have tectonic plates that are pushing up, and so at those points you have more volcanic activity, and that's the magma that's coming up and that's pushing up. Yeah, so interesting. Fada in the chat is saying, keep in mind, 4,000 feet is not even 1 mile, right? So this is still, but we're under the ocean.
Okay, but also Paul Disney in the chat room is bringing up something important to mention too, which he's saying that the mantle is not liquid, it's solid all the way down to the core because the pressure doesn't let that stuff to be liquid. If so, how is upwelling happening?
Well, it's not liquid. It's like, it's like, but things shift and there is movement.
There's fluid properties to it.
Fluid,
but it's
yes. It becomes more of a fluid, and this is where the division between our categories of gas, solid, liquid that we use to define categories. Fluid is actually, it is a liquid, but fluids are not always liquids.
What?
Or
what?
Liquids.
Are you just talking about like there's oobleck, right? There's like non-Newtonian fluids. So it could be like, I don't know.
Exactly. So that's a great example, because a non-Newtonian fluid can be solid in some when it is struck.
When you slap it.
You slap it, right? Yes. Or liquid or more liquidy when it is just hanging out. Magma itself, when it's so hot and the pressure is smushing things up, when it comes up out of a volcano, that is definitely a fluid. And then it cools and is solid igneous rock. But you have a lot of movement in the mantle. And one of the things that we've been learning through decades of research into what's underneath the crust of our planet is just the complexity of the convection currents. There's water down there mixed into things. There's the carbon that has been forced and pushed into diamonds, and there are pockets of solids and that are not as fluid inside of it's so cool. And there's like multiple thermoclines and different layers within the mantle before you get to the core. And the core itself isn't even just one core. It has like an outer core and an inner core. And so we try and make these definitions, but there are boundaries, there are transition layers, right? There's places of transition. And so that's where they're kind of they're not through the crust into the mantle. And a lot of media has been like, we drilled into the mantle. And no, we have not drilled into the mantle, but we are at a place underneath the Atlantic Ocean where we are close to spots where magma from the mantle is pushing upwelling into Paul Disney in the chat is making some great commentary about the way that the magma forms and how it's working. But yeah, fluids, they're fascinating. Go down a rabbit hole, everybody, because fluids are super fun.
Yeah, this is an area I don't know much about beyond what Bill Nye taught me, which apparently is only part of the story.
So from fluids, let's talk about some lasers on the moon.
Ooh.
Yeah. So why do we want to be shooting lasers to the moon? Why does NASA's Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter keep firing lasers at JAXA's SLIM smart lander for investigating the moon lander? Why is this happening? What are they doing? Well,
they're engraving their name in it, right?
Right. I know. Chairface Chippendale must run NASA now. Well, NASA's reporting that they have been working with JAXA over several years on using lasers from space in orbit around the moon to target retroreflectors that are on the JAXA's lander. The reasoning for this is that the retroreflector is kind of in a weird spot, and so it's like really hard target shooting. And since it's not optimal, it's making sure that the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter and NASA and the engineers and scientists who are involved in trying to study exact locations and orientations of lots of things on the moon and make sure that landers are landing the way that they should be and that astronauts and future lunar colonies, that things are going great. They have been really, really trying to make their laser pinging more accurate. They've pinged the lander about 8 times previously, but they haven't had a lot of luck at getting it to actually return the signal, to bounce back like a mirror to the the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter. So NASA and JAXA worked together. They predicted the orbit of the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter and where the SLIM lander was, and they were able to coordinate everything to make it work. And so this is very exciting for the researchers because according to Zhao Sun, who led the team building SLIM's retroreflector at Goddard Space Flight Center, says LRO's altimeter wasn't built for this type of application. So the chances of pinpointing a tiny retroreflector on the moon's surface are already low. And to have reached a retroreflector that faces sideways instead of pointing to the sky shows that these little devices are incredibly resilient. So yes, little lasers on the moon have been shot. Well, yeah, NASA shot lasers at the moon, and it makes us all happy. I mean, we shot lasers at Japanese landers, and it was on purpose, and it was okay. Laser partnerships.
Great.
Yay.
I hope it stays that way.
Yeah. Well, hopefully this kind of work is going to make what we do in the future more accurate, make us be able to, be able to bounce more LiDAR, more signals, and have more and better communication to those hard to reach places in crevasses and caves and other spaces where people might end up in the future. So it's very important for that. Yeah. Fun times at NASA and JAXA. They've been having fun together. Oh, Blair, do you like mayonnaise?
I love mayonnaise. I know that's kind of controversial.
I love mayonnaise as well. I'm a fan.
Yeah.
I really do like mayonnaise. Well, some researchers from Lehigh Laboratory at Lehigh University are studying the dynamics of fluids, because fluids are interesting. Like I said earlier, fluids can be very interesting in studying the mechanisms of how high acceleration and other forces like centrifugal forces lead to what they are calling the instability threshold, where materials, they kind of smush a little bit and then they turn and then they're like, and they become unstable. And when they are unstable, there are little interesting things that happen to them in the way that they interact, and they are less predictable in their actions. And so the big fun thing for this is that these researchers for years have been putting mayonnaise to the test to help inertial confinement fusion.
Are they trying to separate it back out into its original components? Trying to pull a yolk out? Or like, what does that mean, become unstable?
Yeah, so it is a non-Newtonian fluid. Mayonnaise.
No, it's not. If you smack mayonnaise, okay.
It's not as solid as the oobleck that you make in those experiments, but when it's accelerated, it acts in a non-Newtonian way. There are different materials, oils and solids that are in the mayonnaise that they change the way they work together. The researcher Banerjee, who's talking about these hydrodynamic instabilities that form sometimes in those inertial confinement fusion experiments in the plasma, he likens it to two materials that penetrate one another like fingers in the presence of gravity or other accelerating fields. And so when those fingers form, you don't get as much energy. When there's nice bonds, so mayonnaise being accelerated to the point of being more solid and having fingers holding hands, it would, yeah.
Did you have to say fingers? That makes it gross for some reason.
Mayonnaise fingers.
No.
I enjoy it. Yes. I
I
am saying fingers that much because it's fun.
I don't get it. But what does it do that's not normal when it's accelerated?
So because its fluidic properties, when it is accelerated in a centrifuge, it deforms and it becomes more solid in that acceleration.
It becomes more solid.
Because
does like water like separate out from it and it becomes more solid, or it just
becomes so there's what they say is there's elasticity, so there's the merging and deformation, and then there's stability, and that's when the fingers are then, and then after that is the instability, and that's when things get weird and the energy reduces and it's less predictable. And the researchers have been using mayonnaise for many years because they don't have to have a big, expensive set up with high pressure and high temperature to make it happen. They just use a centrifuge in the lab, put mayonnaise in, and can control what happens and investigate the phase transitions in the mayonnaise.
That's so funny. It becomes unpredictable. I feel like the reason people like mayonnaise is because it is extremely predictable.
Right? It's mayonnaise. That's what it is. That's what you're gonna get.
It's almost a synonym for super like tame and plain and dependable mayonnaise.
Yeah, well, if anybody
Not if
wants
you put it in
to
a centrifuge.
if anybody wants to use science mayonnaise, apparently Hellmann's mayonnaise is what they have used for years. I do not know if they are sponsored, or I don't know. I haven't.
That's hilarious. Oh man, Hellmann giving them money to put their mayonnaise in a centrifuge for product placement.
Science mayonnaise. It's a Mayo-Science fusion lab. I mean,
where is this lab again?
Lehigh University.
Where's that? Should I Google it?
I need to look at Lehigh University is, I know exactly.
In Pennsylvania.
Pennsylvania. Yes, thank you.
So, okay, the reason I ask is because Hellmann's mayonnaise is called Best Food mayonnaise here.
Oh,
it's a Carl's Jr. and Hardee's situation. So so Hellmann's east of, what is it? Hellmann's east of the Rockies or so? What is it?
It's where
the Rocky Mountains.
The difference between soda and pop, and
kind of, yeah. Or it's like,
and it's not the Mayo Clinic.
What is
everybody.
it? Dryers and not Briars. No. Dryers and I forget. But yeah, there's all these brands that have different names on either end of the country. Yeah,
I know.
Anyway,
I
digress.
Phase transitions is very in mayonnaise. Who knew? Mayonnaise may make our plasma and fusion future brighter than ever.
Through mayonnaise. Through whipped
molten
egg.
Mayonnaise. I just tell you, I can't. It's just hilarious. Oh my goodness. Let's see. Next, yeah. Oh my goodness. This is going quickly, slowly. I don't even know what to say anymore. I hope everybody's having a good time. If you enjoy mayonnaise, may you go have a sandwich? Well, I very briefly say that this is This Week in Science. Thank you so much for joining us for this episode. And we are here every Wednesday, 8 p.m.-ish Pacific time on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitch. And you could subscribe and share, which is really great. And that would be awesome. Additionally, our website is twis.org. And if you would like to support us, you can hit the Patreon button at twis.org and choose your level of support at Patreon. Or you can look at our Zazzle link, which is also at twis.org. Go to our Zazzle store, where there's lots of cool TWIS merch. A lot of it art, originally, not AI generated, but human hand generated by Blair, which is amazing. She made the things. And there's also here on YouTube the ability to donate as well. And we thank you, Tulak, Horde, and the Acolyte Orchestra. I hope are you our acolyte now? Anyway, thank you all for being here and supporting us. We cannot do this show without you. I mean, really, it would just be me and Blair talking about mayonnaise fingers all night alone without you. Oh my gosh. Blip. Okay. Coming on back to more science conversation. It is time for that part of the show that we love to call Blair's Animal Corner with Blair.
She loves our creatures, great and small. Biped, millipede, no pet at all. If you want to hear about animals, she's your girl. Except for giant pandas and squirrels.
What you got, Blair?
Oh, it's nice to horse you tonight. Do you agree?
Nay! Oh, wait. Yay!
Yay.
Yay!
I'm as happy as a horse, or as smart as a horse, or as persistent, or as tricky. I'm not sure. Anyway.
Are you going to saddle
hey.
us with some science?
Yeah. Here's my one sentence story. Horses are smarter than we thought.
Duh. This is like one of
It's one of
Blair's
those.
duh. Yeah, okay.
No, the reason I brought this story is because I absolutely love the experiment design and the results that they received to find out, yes, horses are smarter than we thought. So horses are thought to not be very smart for a bunch of reasons. One of them being that they have a pretty underdeveloped prefrontal cortex. So this is a classic one, is that we go, oh, their prefrontal cortex is small or underdeveloped. They can't be that smart.
No self-control.
Right, exactly. And so this is a study from Nottingham Trent University School of Animal, Rural, and Environmental Sciences. And they took these equine scientists and they took them out to test on horses to see how they learn and how knowledge can be used to help make future decisions as they learn. So they had this task where first they had to kind of train them to do a behavior. So they had them touch a piece of card with their nose and then they got a treat. So, okay, great. Touch card, get treat. Excellent. Then they had them touch the card with their nose. But if there was a light on next to the card, they would not get a treat. If the light was off, they did get a treat. They had trouble with the task. They really had trouble figuring out when to touch the card and when not to touch the card to get the treat. So there was very little pattern to this. Sometimes they got the treat and sometimes they didn't. So normally I think researchers would be like, man, horse is dumb. But instead,
you can't figure out this human design study that is maybe not appropriate to the way horses think. What?
This is why I wanted to talk about this, actually. So in the final stage of the study, they had a penalty for touching the card when the light was on. So they would get either a 10-second timeout where they were unable to play the game. So they got a 10-second timeout. So what they found was there was a sudden and basically immediate and significant reduction in errors when they added in this result of a 10-second timeout if they touched the card at the wrong time. They only got a treat if they touched the card at the right point in order. So what's going on here? Of course, this is a human design study, as you mentioned. Yeah, this is kind of the marshmallow test. So really what they think is happening here, to your point, Kiki, is that they didn't bother learning the rules of the game because they just touched the card and sometimes they got treats. And they didn't need to pay attention or put rules on it because there was no negative side to touching a card if you didn't need to. And this is I started kind of going down this complete rabbit hole in my brain about how humans are so focused on getting things right. And why is that? Is that because of punishment early in life? Is that because of value assigned to how often you get things right? And that doesn't really exist in the animal kingdom unless there's stakes. Why does a horse care, right? If they, yeah, exactly. That's the stakes, right? Yeah. But why would a horse care if they touched a card and they didn't get a treat? Why do they care? They touched the card. Okay. Oh, I touched the card. Now I get a treat. Okay. What did they lose? They lost nothing by touching the card.
Yeah.
They're not worried about their grade.
Their metabolic cost or their, the threat to them touching the card is nothing.
But if you're in an agricultural school, there's no threat based on metabolic cost, right? You have infinite hay. So you're good. But so yeah, I think the whole idea of kind of this design of this experiment had a flaw because without a negative consequence. And this isn't punishment. There's a difference between like punishment and negative consequence, right? So
Yes.
basically, you're trying to train the horse, this is right and this is the wrong answer. How do they know that's the wrong answer if you don't differentiate what, So I
Mhm.
think it's an interesting design change that they had to apply to this model to be able to actually say, does the horse understand the game? So instead of not understanding the game the first time, they just didn't care to learn. And once there was a reason to learn, bam, they figured it out. They learned it. They had the ability to understand this complex process. So there's no, basically, they're not geniuses, but they're a lot smarter than previous studies have suggested, than we have suggested based on their brain structure. And so they have this form of learning called model-based learning,
Hmm.
which was previously assumed to be too complex for them to learn. So they learned it.
I think one of the most important things that a researcher I studied under in graduate school ever taught me was to not think like me if I was doing work with animals. Why do you think it works? Why do you think it doesn't work? Stop thinking like a person. Start thinking like the animal, because the animal is looking at the world in a potentially different way, probably very different
Yeah,
way than you are.
absolutely.
You
Yeah.
know?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like all the time we have studies that we talk about on this show where the experimental design kind of assumes that an animal is going to behave or think like a human.
Mhm.
And I will always take issue with that. The whole
Yeah.
sense of self test where there's a dot on your face, do you touch it? Does that animal care there's a dot on their face? Maybe they know that there's a dot on their face, but they don't care. you know? There's
One day there was a dot. Now there's no dot. What happened? Do I care? Nah, didn't make a difference in my
right.
life. Yeah.
So it has
Yeah.
to be relevant to the animal. There has to be
Mhm.
consequences that there has to
Yeah.
be stakes, right? And you have to make sure that you're measuring what you think you're measuring. And in this case,
Yes.
they just measured like,
Yes.
hey, if I touch this card, sometimes they give me a treat, which was not the intention. And so they had to adjust. But ultimately, in the end, horses are a lot smarter than we thought. Go fig.
Horses are really smart. The idea that they wouldn't
Mhm.
be. I mean, I don't. There have been other stories and headlines, and I know there are lots of horse people out there. But the connections that they make with people, the personalities that they have,
Mhm.
the way that they do follow directions and learn a lot of things. People have compared their intelligence to that of a dog. Um,
Right.
but
Yeah.
that again is inaccurate because horses are not dogs.
Right, and dogs are
So
predators and horses are descendants of prey, and so yes, it's
yeah,
like so different.
so many
It's
differences. Yeah.
I mean, we just the Olympics just happened and I assume they had dressage. I really didn't watch much of the Olympics this year, but dressage is something that you watch that you'd be like, why would a horse how could a horse know to do this weird they have to be somehow smart to be able to do this weird stuff, to be able to respond to verbal cues from their rider, to do behavior that they have no reason to do in real life for
Yes.
any reason.
Yeah. I don't
So,
know.
yeah, there you
You've
go.
talked about clicker training people, so I mean,
Yeah.
the horses too,
Yeah,
but yeah.
absolutely. Yes, from horses to lemurs. Lemurs, hey, Kiki, lemurs are also smart.
No, they look so their big eyes and the way they kind of
Yeah, they
go,
look dumb. You can say it. They look
and,
dumb.
and it's like, King, what's his name from Madagascar? The movie,
Yeah,
like,
I don't remember
yeah.
his name. Um,
He was very excited, but yeah, I didn't
mhm.
think the lemurs were that smart in that animated movie. Anyway,
In comparison to monkeys. Yeah, they're
they're older.
dumb. They're prosimians. They don't have
Mhm.
that prefrontal cortex, not as developed as it is in monkeys. Their brain is just generally not as developed as more recent primates from evolutionary history. So the reason they're called prosimians is because they're kind of before simians, before monkeys. So it's thought that lemurs are what all monkey relatives looked like to a certain extent before evolution got their mitts in those prosimians and turned them into the monkeys that we know and live today. But because lemurs are on Madagascar, which is an island, they didn't have the same selective pressure. They didn't have these large mega predators. And so the lemurs that we see today didn't really have the same evolutionary pressures and look kind of
But there are so many species of lemurs, like
but only
Madagascar.
on Madagascar.
Yeah.
So you've had all this
Specialized.
evolutionary time, and so you've had evolutionary radiation, right? So you have had evolutionary movement, but they haven't had these large skips and bounds in their development that simians have had on the mainland, I guess, if that makes sense. So
They didn't have enough
anyway.
rafts. Yeah.
Right. So this is a study from New York University, and they were looking at how they forage to find food and what methods they use to investigate and find food when they forage. So they were looking at different types of sensory information that they might take in, ecological information, and social knowledge. And they wanted to see what they're using when to find their food. Historically, there have been two schools of thought on how primates develop how they developed their bigger brains that I was talking about. One was ecological pressures. That could be like scarcity of food. And the other is social pressures where they're living in a group. So looking at prosimians, you see kind of the evolutionary roots of later simians. And so it's a good place to start when you're trying to kind of parse out what came first and what was most important to their development. So they took basically takeout containers. They look like Chinese food containers, and they put cantaloupe in them, and they numbered them. And so some of them had cantaloupe in them and some of them didn't. And then they let the lemurs into their exhibit space. This was in a lemur research facility in Florida, and let them find the cantaloupe. So they quickly learned which containers had food in them. And then they could remember which ones, because they used the same ones over and over to fill each time.
Okay.
So
the researchers came in and refilled them, and they were always,
Yes.
Okay.
So days, weeks, even months later, the order in which they approached the baited containers was 50% better than chance. So they definitely knew where they were going. But they almost always, this is 98% of the time, opened up the fruit-filled containers first. So even when they then switched it up and didn't put cantaloupe in the historically cantaloupe-filled container, they still went to the cantaloupe-filled containers first. So that means they're using their sense of smell. So now we have our ecological knowledge, what areas produce fruit, which containers produce fruit.
Nice,
we have our
yummy,
sensory knowledge,
mm-hmm.
what smells like fruit. And then the last one is social factors. So some of the groups were egalitarian, and so information on where to get melon and the melon that they found were willingly shared. Others had more hierarchical groups, so the dominant lemurs would take advantage of subordinates. If subordinates discovered cantaloupe, then the dominants would come over and take it. But the subordinates were also more likely to find the fruit, and they would eat a bunch before the dominant individual showed up. So they still got the most of the melon. And so they said that there was a definite social structure impact on how they did their foraging ultimately. So all three factors are operating at the same time. They have memories of where the food are, they're considering olfactory information, and social factors are keying into how they're foraging. So that is a surprise to researchers that all three are happening at the same time. I'm not sure why that's a surprise. It's another like, hey, animals
Because
are good
lemurs,
at what they do.
they're not as smart as
Yeah.
the monkeys. They're
Mhm.
pro, not now.
Mhm. But
Yeah.
where that does get interesting is that, again, because they're prosimians, they are considered to have kind of the ancestral form of a lot of evolutionary traits that are carried into monkey and apes in the evolutionary tree. The expectation is that this stuff was conserved and started way back then and did not come later. So all of those monkeys and apes that we consider so smart for doing these three things, it might be rooted way, 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 way far back in evolutionary history.
The social stuff also, like, I mean, the sensory, I have no question about that. Of course,
Yeah,
as
of course.
cantaloupe or
Yeah.
any fruit ripens, the animal can smell it, and that's a signal in the environment. But the social stuff, I am immediately thinking about like the sneaky males or like the very,
Yeah,
there
like
are
in
the
sea lions or trout. Yeah.
right, there are different strategies. It's not just like there's the dominant ones and the not dominant ones. There are also other strategies for success within populations. And so the
Mhm.
fact that they're the less dominant lemurs were also able to like be like, I found it and I'm gonna eat it really fast, and then
You're
they
like,
get chased off.
"Yep, I
Maybe
found it. Nope, nope, this is how much there was when I found it. Yep. Mhm,
and
mhm.
maybe
Yeah,
there's
I just
something that
can't
they're
talk right now."
and maybe there's even something that the researchers didn't see related to picking up scraps or other aspects of how the consumption and the
Mhm.
hierarchies worked in combination with the ecological factors. But yet again, Blair's well, duh, animal corner.
Blair's animals are smarter than we thought corner. Blair's humans are not that special corner. I feel like that's actually the one.
I
Humans are
think
not that special.
it is more accurate. Yeah, we think we're so special.
Yeah.
We come from a long lineage of evolution. We are a kludge that just happens to be human.
Yeah. So next time you're doing so good in that escape room, thank a lemur.
I don't know. Thank the slime mold. Thank
Oh, yeah.
I don't know. Thank the lowly sponge. Yes, at the bottom of the ocean. Cool things that humans can do. Apparently, researchers from Reichman University just published a paper that is about how humans can hear temperature. And I don't know this whole study. Anyway, this is Frontiers in Psychology. The title of the paper is Hearing Temperatures Employing Machine Learning for Elucidating the Cross-Modal Perception of Thermal Properties Through Audition. They got a bunch of people to volunteer to be in their study, and then they asked them how they, do you think that you can tell the difference between hot and cold beverages being poured, between different water temperatures being poured into different containers? And people a lot of the time are like, yeah, no, I don't know if I can at all. But their research and the neural network that they created was able to actually classify audio recordings of water at different temperatures and map the thermal properties that are physically encoded in the sound. And also, they were able to say that, yes, even though people don't consciously think that they can hear the difference in hot or cold water being poured, we are like other animals in our ability to perceive temperature in audio recordings. And I think that's the thing that is interesting to me about this particular study, because it's audio recordings, but there is, I don't know, there's something about the way that boiling water, the steam coming off of it, the sound of the heat interacting with a cold mug. I don't know. There's something about that I think I can classify, or I could classify if I were asked to. And I feel the same way about colder water, that there is something about the way that it hits surfaces that is different. So
Kiki, I'm going to send you a voice memo later. And you're going to have to tell me if it's hot water or cold water, because I don't think so. I'm going to tell you right now, I don't think so.
So it's just really fun, though, this study, not having the visual information of the water being poured into a sink, a cup, whatever. It's the recordings, just the audio aspect. So there's no other context to the recordings. And people were able to discern, and they were able to discern at similar amounts as this machine learning algorithm was able to.
I'm assuming that this is good science, and they use the same water spigot to dispense the liquid, and they use the same cup to accept the liquid, and all these things are the same.
Yeah. So from the study, they had their training set, they had recordings, and they poured water until a cup was full. There were 32 audio recordings, 16 hot, 16 cold, average length of 9.2 seconds for them. It consisted of recordings that, 19 hot recordings of 85 degrees Celsius for the test set, cold recordings of 15 degrees Celsius. Cold. They were automated from 5 different fixed heights, from 34 to 38.7 centimeters, and fixed lengths of 32 seconds each. And then the recordings themselves were segmented into 4-second segments. So they had variety of 127 labeled audio segments that could be hot or could be cold from different heights and of different temperatures.
Yeah, because so I'm glad to hear that, because my original assumption is that I could tell the difference between hot and cold water being poured, but that's because you're pouring from a tea kettle into a mug, or you're pouring from a pitcher into a glass. You pour the hot water slow, you pour the cold water fast, right? So there's all these other variables going on in our personal lives when we experience these different sounds. So I guess that's my other question is are we priming ourselves and training ourselves on the difference between these things via all these other variables our entire lives? And then we can figure it out because of that? Or is this something that we are born with, the ability to understand the way that hot and cold water sounds?
I think that's a very interesting question. I do not believe that question has been answered. I think the data has yet to determine, whether or not this is learned, whether it is something that is innate, how it's acquired, what happens based on experience.
So they didn't identify what sounds different. They just identified that human subjects could tell the difference.
Hot. They voted, this is hot, this is cold. Yeah. What am I hearing?
So the researchers did nothing to try to figure out what the different sound is.
No, not at that point yet. So they that's what they were trying to do with their audio algorithm model, which is to be able to start to get at what recording, what classification, and then maybe from this point forward there can be some differentiation of what actually is going on in the noise and how we actually hear it. And
Shnogo in the chat brought up a really good point, which is the density of water changes as it gets hotter, so that might change the sound quality. It just feels like it wouldn't be significant enough of a change, but I guess our ears are not too bad. I mean, as far as the animal kingdom goes, our ears are kind of trash. So the fact that we can figure that out is pretty great.
I had a fun conversation with Marshall this last weekend about how, you find out, maybe you ask a question. I've asked questions of people for decades, right? And so many times people have been like, "Psh, no, that's not even a thing." And then I'm like, oh, okay, well, whether or not it's a thing. So, okay. And then and then a study comes out and you're like, oh my gosh, it makes a big difference, whatever. Um, so we were talking about audio frequencies and sound transfer and vibrations and how, um, you know, uh, how cochlear implants work and the vibrational sound that is being used for bone transmission and other ways to allow enhanced hearing. And I was talking about like, oh my gosh, the pinna, the earlobes, like all the things in your ears. Like you look at a cat, a horse, animals that move their ears around to more specifically locate where sound is coming from. What if at some point people start having like ear modifications to hear different frequencies of sound? Like, what if you could go to an audiologist and the audiologist is like,
Wow.
yeah, well, you've got a deficiency in this frequency range and blah, blah, blah. And they're like, yeah, okay. And you go to a plastic surgeon or you get like your, stick on ears. Like, I don't know, use eyelash glue to put ears on. I don't know. People into body modification. I think this is a thing we should be talking about. And how is the military already using it? Like they've got their infrared and their night vision. What about?
They have a helmet with Batman ears. I think I talked about that on DTNS once, like a year ago or something.
See, I was onto
Yeah.
something years ago, and somebody was like, "No, that's not a thing." They just didn't want me to know what the military was already
Yeah,
doing.
you were getting too close.
Too close to the truth, too much. That's what it is. Yes. But how do you think about this morally? What should we be doing? Oh my gosh, what are your moral values? Are your moral values always the same? I mean, you think, oh, this is me. I'm just usually the same. Maybe I'll, could change different things, whatever. Researchers just publishing a study out of the University of British Columbia in Proceedings of National Academy of Sciences analyzed surveys for more than 230,000 people over 10 years in the United States and had some smaller data sets also taken from Canada and Australia. And the researchers found that what their data sits well with is there are basically like 5 moral values that can be lumped into different categories: loyalty, authority, purity, care, and fairness. Researchers call these binding values because they are group norms. They allow people to align themselves together. And you usually have loyalty, authority, maybe fairness as more conservatively aligned, care, care and fairness, maybe a little bit more liberally aligned. But beyond that, that's not what they were looking at. In this study, they were interested in whether or not moral values change. And so they looked at the data and they looked at how they did a couple of studies, looked at how people were describing how they felt in different seasons of the year, what was going on. And the research suggests that there is a biannual seasonal cycle in American moral values that also is similar to Canada and Australia. They did 5 studies in total, and all of them have evidence that moral values change with the seasons, with spring and autumn being strongest for moral endorsement, for loyalty, authority, and purity, and the weakest in the summer and the winter. But care and fairness don't have that kind of a cycle. The summer decrease that they found, and not the winter, there's like some evidence that it has to do with people's anxiety. So there's like seasonal cycles of American anxiety. And so they're suggesting that people are more anxious during periods of time like, oh, election season. I don't know, like during pandemic or flu periods. Oh, you got to go get your flu shot and your COVID shot right now. Times when maybe Supreme Court or Congress is deciding on things and there are judgments being made. So anyway, they are onto a trail of human or American anxiety, which seems to correlate a bit with the smaller sample sets of Canada and Australia, to a change in how groups and people judge events and others with moral values.
Okay.
So we're in the
what can we do with
summertime,
this
so everybody's
information?
like, yeah, it's fine.
Yeah, what do we use this information for? How is this helpful to us?
So Dr. Mark Schaller, the senior author, says, we noticed that anxiety levels peak in the spring and autumn, which coincides in periods with when people endorse binding values more strongly. This suggests that higher anxiety may drive people to seek comfort in group norms and traditions upheld by binding values. So what that suggests to me is that we either try to help people be less anxious during these periods of time, or when we're communicating about issues that may cause anxiety for whatever reason, that we find ways to address connection, loyalty, the values that seem to be the more group binding, more conservative kind of values. I think this is information that can be used, but would have to be, careful. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, when you talk to people, always be compassionate and respectful of where they are. If somebody's anxious, don't make them more anxious. Try to, I don't know. I'm sorry I said mayonnaise fingers so many times earlier.
That's okay. That's icky. That's not anxiety inducing.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, does this have to do, should we time our elections differently? Or is it the
But the
elections
elections
that
are
lead
causing the
to the
anxiety.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is there, are there different ways that we can talk about in groups and out groups, injustices for various groups of people in, different times of the year in ways that are that are more binding, more unifying? I think those are the questions that still need to be addressed, and how it could be applied. But I think that is a really great question. Mm-hmm. If studies like this make you a little bit depressed, well, maybe some music will do you good.
Music always does me good.
Yeah. But why?
I don't know. It makes my brain happy.
I know, but this is the question that was asked by researchers publishing this last week in Cell Reports. Their study called Auditory Entrainment Coordinates Cortical-BNST-NAc Triple Time Locking to Alleviate the Depressive Disorder. What does that all mean? Well, there are oscillations in the auditory area, and this study was able to see entrainment or a synchronization between these areas of the brain, the BNAC and NAC. So the auditory cortex and the sound that's coming in. And so when there's synchrony, between what's being listened to and the signals or the electrical activity in the brain. And this is measured by EEG. So it's, just electrodes on the outside of the head. They found that there was an antidepressant effect, that the entrainment was able to calm people, make them feel a little bit better. And they suggest that, this isn't the only solution, but that in this particular study, they also just used classical music. But the particular synchronization of the music and how it ties to the brain and whether it was enjoyed or not is very important to how it works. But anyway, music comes in, hits your ears, becomes a neural signal, goes into the auditory cortex, which is already buzzing with activity. And from there, if there is synchronization, it can potentiate coordination between different brain areas that are involved in the release of things like dopamine and serotonin. These are theta oscillations that they're talking about, and the release can have antidepressant effects. I mean, I think the big question is which songs, how many, is it only classical music? And what are we going to do? What are we going to do with this? But I think,
don't listen to a lot of minor chords. I feel like that's not going to help your depression at all.
yeah. But the fun part of this is the time locking and the way that everything is what they say triple time locked between these brain areas and the auditory cortex. So there's a lot of synchronization that's going on. Oh man, I was showing all these pictures to myself and I never hit the button during
Oh
the
no,
story.
I didn't know you
I
were
had
trying
them.
to share.
Yeah, I had this whole thing and I was like, I'm gonna share this, and now it looks
Let me
funny.
see.
Hold on, let me refresh. There we go. Okay, hold on. I was gonna look at, there's some great pictures here, so I was going to try and show it. I thought, but I didn't hit add to stage. Dun, dun, dun. Brain areas, nucleus accumbens. Yes, the BNST, the cortex, the pathway of synchronization, and then beyond that, the electrodes, the music treatment, the classical, high enjoyment, low enjoyment. What do you like, Bach? I don't know. What do we like? What do we got? There's a very big difference between the signals in the brain of the liking and the not liking the music, the different areas of the brain, the theta bands, and how they showed up in the EEG were very different in how they showed up. And yeah, so the images from this study are really great. It's in, I think, Proceedings of the National Academy. Oh, no, sorry, Cell Reports. It's fully open access. So if you're interested in the timing and the entrainment of the brain, I think this is a very interesting direction of research, because does it have to be music? Does it have to be a certain kind of music? Are there just certain beats and sounds? People talk a lot about binaural beats, which are very controversial because honestly, the research has not come out in support of binaural beats being very therapeutic, but people still love to say that. But
that means a different tempo in each ear?
Yes.
Ugh.
But specific. Yeah. But it's supposed to be it's stimulating the two sides of your brain and causing conversation between. And
God, I think that would just drive me nuts.
Yeah.
Oh, that'd be really hard. I don't know.
Yeah,
Unless they sync up still. And it's just
yeah,
a drum machine on stereo. I could handle that, but
right. But that's the question. There is enjoyment in the dyssynchrony and then the synchronization, the way that there's discord and then a completion anyway. So much. But how can we use this? Will therapists be telling us to listen to certain classical composers, or will they just be like, hey, those songs that really make you feel good, just listen to them some more when you're not feeling good.
Yeah. Just
Right?
listen to the Beatles. If you want to be more contemporary, listen to some Bruno Mars, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah. And my last story for the night has nothing to do with Bruno Mars, but if I had hidden him somewhere on the earth, how on earth would I remember where I put him?
Was
The earth
he
is
the last place you looked?
it's always the first question, right? What's the last thing you remember? Where was the last place you
Retrace your
remember?
steps. When did you last have Bruno Mars?
I never have. Just
Oh, okay.
YouTube, I guess. Vimeo. I don't yeah, the internet's helped me out there. So this gets back to like one of my favorite subjects, this study, as my PhD was involved in studying spatial learning and memory in birds, and specifically looking at the hippocampus of birds as the area of the bird brain involved in managing all the spatial locations that birds possibly hid their food. And there's all sorts of behaviors involved. It's like, oh my gosh, where are the spaces? There's lots of stuff in the environment. Is it a complex environment? Is it a simple environment? What are the things? What are the cues I have to look at? And then do I have competitors who are going to come and steal my caches? Do I have to like make sure they're really, really well hidden? Do I have to hide them and then rehide them? What are all the things I need to worry about? So we know, and researchers have shown many times that yes, in mice, in rats, in humans, in birds, the hippocampus is very, very important for spatial navigation and location. In mice and rats, we've shown there are place cells. There's certain cells in the brain that they spike, so they activate when you're in a certain place. So me in this room where my studio is, the place cells in my hippocampus have a particular signal. You go through a door, I'm going to go in my hallway. Maybe the same place cells spike, but a different combination of them, and maybe in a different pattern. So that your place cells play a role in encoding spatial information, and they're not always, they might be active. One cell might be active in lots of different places, but maybe in different ways and in concert with other cells to allow it to happen. And so when I come back in this room, every time I come back in this room and I go, oh, where did I put that thing? The place cells for my studio are the ones that are active and helping me retrieve that memory of where I put things in here. Okay. We know this happens in mice and rats. We've done some measurements in people with epilepsy and others in humans, but there's still really no good model as to the mechanism of how this works. We know memory happens in complex environments. We know the Siberian tit can store over 250,000 different objects in the environment in Siberia over the course of its food storing and winter survival season. How do they remember? So these researchers publishing in Nature this week have come up with a model. It's not using any animals yet, but it's titled a non-memory based functional neural framework for animal caching behavior. So where did you put your keys? Where did the squirrel hide the nuts? Where did the bird put the food? These researchers, using a neural model, so basically computers, to model how neurons would work in a particular environment, they have determined that there is there's similarity to something already used in computers, which is called hashing. And in hashing, the computers are basically like, okay, this is a yes, there's a no. It's a method that it's a function that occurs in specific contexts. So in the context they're talking about, they say in the paper, hashing refers to a class of functions that map arbitrarily complex data to a fixed a fixed-sized, lower dimensional representation. So basically, this is how does the tiny hippocampus store the world? How does the tiny hippocampus store all of these things? Well, it's possibly through some analog of this hash function that is something that's already been used in computers. And so they tried to add complexity. They made grids. They added scores for, what should be in the environment and how a bird might store their food. And we're able to show through the work that overall, this might be the mechanism because of the way that hippocampal cells, place cells, have different spiking rates in different places, and this remapping and reuse that we've seen, that this may be like how the vast amount of information from the world is simplified, or at least what's the word when you take all this stuff on the computer, compiled, or it's like, it's smushed. Anyway, computer words. I'm doing great. Yeah. So I think it's a very interesting study because it's one of the big questions of like, okay, we've got these birds, we've got these things, we've got animals that do all this stuff. Where did I put my keys? But how does the brain remember all of this?
This is classic. This is the like, oh, humans have to be special. So if we found that animals can do something that we can do, we have to figure out why and explain away why it's just an evolutionary thing that has nothing to do with pure intelligence. It's just something that they're hardwired to do. But I don't know. I can't really find anything these days, so I could use help.
But this is the thing that I think is really interesting about when we start talking about generalized artificial intelligence, or going beyond the correlational matrices, complex correlational matrices of probabilities that we're currently using as algorithms with large language models and generative AI and all that kind of stuff. They're rules, right? It's computer programs. It's yes or no signals, and at what point do you go from simplifying everything down in the world to whether it's a bit flip, right? A 0 or a 1. At what point, this is why physicists still try to explain biology and evolution through math. Even though as a biologist, you're like, you're missing so much stuff. This is why when people start switching into different territory, then their focus is people miss things because humans, like, we want to simplify things, right? We want to rule. And this is like, okay, maybe we can make these probability maps that will help robots remember where things are. And how do you take this neural network model into a real world situation? And that's why I said they did not do this in real animals. This is not actually, comparing hippocampal place cell activation. This is just math and, them making math rules. So, yeah, the resolution, the fidelity, there's, there are changes in it. And what their work shows, though, is that the network does change as the environment becomes more complex and the needs are more complex. So, I don't know. I still think, regardless, what magic that there are cooperating cells within our bodies that allow us to exist within this world, to survive, to connect, to communicate with others, to share information, to think, to be curious, to ask questions, to want to learn more. I mean, there's so much beyond the simplification of the zeros and ones. But mechanisms are always fun. Let's see if this one works. I don't know. It's time for Blair to go to bed. Her baby's probably very upset at this point in time.
Yeah, I don't know. We'll find out. If not, I'm just gonna Scrooge McDuck into the sheets.
Oh, can you actually dive like that into your bed? That would be
No, of course
really
not.
amazing. Pew! All right. Yes. Consolidation. Yes, Kevin Reardon. When you sleep,
That'd be
your brain
great,
will
Kevin. Yes, I would
consolidate.
love to sleep and consolidate the day into memories.
That's the
But I
entrainment
kind of
of the
gave up that hope a year ago.
children destroy your brain's ability to remember, to function. You're just
It made me feel better when I read that the reason that new moms can't remember where their phone is because it's not
they're not
just the lack of sleep, is that they're thinking about 30,000 other things.
the multitasking cannot be
Yeah.
understated.
Oh, I
Yes.
have to restock the diaper bag, and when's the last time he ate? And I have to reschedule that appointment and all these, right? And so that's why you can't remember. 30 years? How would I have to wait 30 years to get that back?
I don't know.
Disrupt my sleep for 30 years.
My son's 13 and I just had a birthday and I have gone on temporary strike and have been spending a lot of time on the couch, a lot of time sleeping, just letting the dishes pile up because why am I always doing them? Why do I have to take care of your wanting to do something? You have a phone now. Call your own friends. Oh my God. So anyway, I haven't told anyone I'm on strike, but I guess
I think
I quiet quit a couple of weeks ago.
yeah, that's different. That's you if you really want to go on strike, you have to organize and make demands.
Yeah, okay. No, I quiet quit then. I just
Okay.
yeah, we'll see how
You're
that
doing the
goes.
bare minimum. Still getting paid in I don't know.
Maybe a hug every once in a while. I don't know.
Healthy family, right? That's I don't
I hope
yeah.
I don't know. I'm not paying attention anymore. All I pay attention to is TWIS every Wednesday night. That's it. I'm just here for
There
you.
you go.
No, I hope everyone enjoyed the show. We have gone through our stories for the night. There is so much more to be talked about in the world, and I hope that your curiosity has been piqued by a number of the topics that we brought up tonight. Shout outs to incredible people who help the show go. Fada, thank you for your help with social media and with show notes. Gord, Arnlore, others who make sure all our chat rooms are great places and nice places for people to talk about the stuff we're talking about on the show. Thank you for doing that. Rachel, thank you for editing the show. And Identity 4, thank you for recording the show. And of course, everyone in the chat room, thank you for being in the chat room and being here while we are doing the show. Discorders, I see you. And that brings me to the thanks to our Patreon sponsors, without whom we would not be able to do this show in such an ongoing fashion. Thank you to Eden Mundell, Alan Viola, Aaron Anathema, Arthur Keppel, Craig Potts, Mary Gertz, Teresa Smith, Richard Badge, Bob Coles, Kent Northcote, George Corris, Pierre Velazarb, John Ratnaswamy, Chris Wozniak, Vegard Shefstead, Donathan Styles, aka Don Stylo, Ali Coffin, Reagan Shubru, Sarah Forfar, Don Mundus, PIG, Stephen Albaran, Daryl Myshak, Andrew Swanson, Fredus 104, Sky Luke, Paul Ronovich, Kevin Reardon, Noodles, Jack, Brian Carrington, David E. Youngblood, Sean Clarence Lamb, John McKee, Greg Riley, Mark Hessenflow, Steve Leisman, aka Zima, Ken Hayes, Howard Tan, Christopher Rappin, Richard Brendan Minish, Johnny Gridley, Remy Day, G. Burton Lattimore, Flying Out, Christopher Dreyer, Greg Briggs, John Atwood, Rudy Garcia, Dave Wilkinson, Rodney Lewis, Paul, Philip Shane, Kurt Larson, Craig Landon, Sue Doster, Jason Olds, Dave Neighbor, Eric Knapp, Lon Makes, EO, Adam Mishkan, Aaron Luthen, Bob Calder, Marjorie, Paul D. Disney, David Summerly, Patrick Pecoraro, and Tony Steele. Thank you all for all of your support. And additionally tonight, thank you to Tulak Horde and the Acolyte Orchestra for their support on YouTube. That was pretty awesome. Moms should rule the world. Kevin Reardon. Oh my goodness. But we could not do what we do without all of you. So if you would like to support us on Patreon, please head over to twis.org and click on that Patreon link. On next week's show,
we will be back on Wednesday at 8 p.m. Pacific time, broadcasting live from our Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook channels.
And if you would like to listen to us as a podcast, are you all ready? Search for This Week in Science wherever podcasts are found. And if you enjoyed this show, get your friends to subscribe too. We like subscribers.
For more information on anything you've heard here today, show notes and links to stories will be available on our website. That's right. Our website is www.twis.org. And you can also sign up for a newsletter.
Yeah. And we love your feedback. So if there's a topic you would like us to cover or address, a suggestion for an interview, please let us know on one of our social media accounts or send us an email. I know someone in the chat was asking earlier what my email is. You can email me at kirsten@thisweekinscience.com.
Just be sure, if you send us an email, to put TWIS, TWIS, in the subject line, or your email will be spam filtered into a to-go box next to a bunch of smelly cantaloupe. And a lemur may find it and then eat it, and then we won't. So put TWIS in the subject line. We look forward to discussing science with you again next week. And if you've learned anything at all from the show tonight, remember,
it's all in your head.
This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science, it's the end of the world. So I'm setting up shop, got my banner unfurled. It says the scientist is in, I'm gonna sell my advice. Show them how to stop the robots with a simple device. I'll reverse global warming with a wave of my hand. And all it'll cost you is a couple of grand. 'Cause this week's science is coming your way. So everybody listen to what I say. I use the scientific method for all that it's worth. And I'll broadcast my opinion all over the earth. 'Cause it's This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. 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 This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. 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 I've got one disclaimer and it shouldn't be news. That what I say may not represent your views, but I've done the calculations.
Have you done the calculations? It's the end of the show. We have reached the end of this week's episode of This Week in Science. I like the fact that we are not just ones and zeros. I don't know. We're all artifacts of whatever makes this place that we call the universe. Who knows? We know nothing. Yeah. Yes. Oh no, the end. It is. And I hope we're not gonna have an after show right now. Blair, are you around next week?
Yes.
Okay. So you
we have to have a larger conversation, perhaps offline, about the fact that the second half of Brian's semester involves him working Tuesday and Wednesday nights in the hospital for 8 weeks straight.
Yeah, that's a thing.
That's going to be a problem. So we'll have to figure something out.
Okay.
I just don't want to miss our 1000th show.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, no. What? There's no way.
No.
No. I mean, I will
we
like
should do it on
push
like
number
a
1000
Saturday or
off.
something. Yeah, I feel like it needs to be a big deal. Like we should do it like during the day on a Saturday and like
Yes.
do a thing. I don't know.
I feel like our 1000th show, we should all be together
That would be great.
somehow. I mean, I don't know. We've talked about it on and off with people in the Discord and other places. People have suggested things over the years, but it's actually actively coming up. And even with, holiday shows and others, this was 982. So
Right.
18 more episodes will get us to 1,000.
So
That's
do we
pretty exciting.
have we done the math already?
I avoid that.
Well, sorry, I'm gonna do it.
Are you in a calendar right now? Oh man.
I'm in a calendar right now. Okay, so this is 82, 83, 84, 85, 86, 87, 88, 89, 90, 91, 92, 93, 94, 95, 96, skipping Thanksgiving, maybe? 97, 98, 99. 1000 would land on December 25th. So if we take that off, our very first show of 2025, January 1st, which also seems like a bad idea, would be, yep. So maybe January 8th would be our 1000th show. Which I will say, Brian's semester will be over, so I can make that.
Yeah. And at the start of a brand new year, and it could be a good, we usually do the first show of a new year as a kind of prediction show. Also, we do retrospectives. We'll have to figure this out and see your schedule, Justin's schedule, see if I need to get guests or if there's, what's gonna happen. Yeah. Well, if anyone has thoughts, ideas, what they would be, what you would be up for. I know some people have wanted to do something in person. I know at least Blair, you, I, and Justin should be in person together for it if we can make that happen. I think there are some big things to think about and figure out, and plans to be made that should probably be made better and more in advance than I usually do things. So. Yeah, my last minute stuff makes me upset. And then I'm like, why'd I do that to myself? And I'm like, oh, yeah, well, because that's just how I am. Okay. But
well, speaking of plans, I do have one other thing I wanted to announce. And that is
on the air.
Okay. Daily Tech News Show, every August they do an experiment week.
Yeah.
And they
Are you
asked me
experimenting?
to do a pilot, so I did one.
Yeah.
And so I don't know when it's airing. I was really hoping to have the air date and time for today, but I don't have it. I think it's next week.
Let me know.
Next week is experiment week. But I definitely wanted to say it here because I don't really use social media anymore with the death of Twitter. Anyway, but it's just me and Brian and our friend Jesse joking about like Pokemon and other fictional animals and what real world animal adaptations fit and kind of what we think the inspiration might be. So,
oh my gosh, I did that when Kai was so into Pokemon growing up. I was like, oh my god, this animal is that, and oh my god, that yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. That was
So
fun.
I went for it. I thought it
Awesome.
would
Well,
be
let us
fun.
know
So
so that the sharing can happen and everyone
yeah.
here can listen if they're not already there. I need to talk to the DTNS people
Yeah.
soon. Maybe we'll get Tom or Roger on the show sometime.
Yeah. That would
I
be
don't know.
great.
I know you've been on their show recently.
Yes. Yeah.
Mhm.
They asked me the last time they asked me, it was like 2 weeks before I was due. I was like, "Oh, no." And then I did it, like, it was
I
maybe
know
6 weeks ago.
they're
Finally.
probably watching right now, or maybe they're not. But they have a scientist lady now, and so they never call me anymore.
Is that true? I didn't know that.
No, I don't know. They probably think I'm busy. I don't know.
Of course.
Yeah, it's all me. Their
You're
doctor,
fancy. You've been on TV.
their PhD is their doctor, but it's Nikki. I think it's a little too close. But anyway,
Oh, Dr. Nikki and Dr. Kiki? Yeah. Tough.
it's a little too close. Anyway,
That's
she's wonderful.
hilarious.
She's brilliant. She's wonderful, and she's a great addition to their team. So I'm happy that they're doing
That's
that. And another thing that I'm really happy for is I was one of the first people on Twitter to take my PhD, and actually there were a lot of people trying in media historically to have the PhD be doctor in front of their name, but like TV media is like, oh, you're not really a doctor. We don't do that. Only medical doctors get to be doctors. And I was one of the first people forever on Twitter to be Dr. Kiki, and all my stuff was
Oh, yeah.
Dr. Kiki, Dr. Kiki, Dr. Kiki.
Yeah.
And a few years back, everybody started being their doctor, whoever, as a Twitter
Yeah.
name. And it makes me so happy to see. It just,
Oh, that's great. Yeah.
change happens, just takes time. And it's very exciting. So, more scientists
You're a
talking
trendsetter.
to people. Oh, that's basically what I was saying, right? I mean, come
Yeah.
on.
Yeah.
I mean, like, totally humble and shit. I mean, oops, S word. Yeah.
Humble and stuff.
And stuff. Yeah. But now, I don't know, Blair, we should talk about other big things than podcasts. Podcasts are amazing, but I want to build systems to help science communication creators know how to communicate messages more effectively so they don't
Oh,
do
yeah.
damage as they communicate. Because
That would be great.
like you with your Noki training and how many times like you went through training and messaging and everything. I learned that a little bit over time just on my own, and reading stuff. But there is like, how many times do you correct Justin, or like we talk about things that are solutions as opposed to just
Yeah.
problems, and we talk about things
Yeah.
in particular imagery. The words we use are really important, and I think the way that we, as a community of science communicators who do this professionally, I mean, some people are just doing it because it's like, oh, whatever, it's my job. I like being creative, whatever. But if you really want to make a difference in the world with the content you are creating, it needs to be done effectively. And who the heck has time within the algorithm churn to read the literature and to figure out what a framework is and how to apply it to what you do? So
Yeah, and the speed at which things move now, in the amount of time it took you to do that, somebody released a TikTok about something that's fake that has gained 2 million views, and now everyone thinks that's real. So it's really hard. It is
so
a
hard.
completely different beast now because
Yep.
of how quickly media moves.
Yeah.
Yeah. But there's
And
good stuff
everybody,
out there. Like, in
there's
particular, I've noticed, like, the medical field, doctors do a really good job in that short format
medical
trying to
doctors.
get good information. Medical doctors. What did I say? Did I just say doctors? Medical doctors and nurses also, and other medical technicians, EMTs. I see lots of human medical personnel releasing information online that is really good, potentially life-saving, and really helps dispel misinformation. So it's happening, but you're right. It needs to be done on a larger scale, and it would be great to have kind of tools.
I have thoughts.
Okay.
Just so you know, if people
I
want
like
to know
it. I
about
like
my
thoughts.
thoughts and want to be helpful, talk to me. My thoughts.
Awesome.
Go to bed. Go comfort your child and
Last I looked,
let Brian
can't-
have a little bit of, or just go Scrooge McDuck and dive into those sheets.
Yeah.
I'm gonna
There's
go
some
to bed.
tossing and turning happening in this crib. We'll see.
Are you monitoring right now?
Yeah. I pulled it up on my phone just to see. We'll see. Poor guy got 5 shots today.
A
Okay.
lot, but really it's all at once, and so it's just like
Yeah.
one bad, and it's really going to be tomorrow. That's probably the worst, or later tonight.
We'll see.
Later tonight.
We'll see. Who knows? I don't predict or expect anymore, so we'll just see. Riding the wave.
There you go, Blair. You have learned. This is how it works for life. Just ride the wave. No expectations. No plans. Just go. Just go. Ride the wave. I feel like we all should be surfers, but sometimes we can't be. So you have children, and then you figure that out.
I'm a more of a boogie boarder, I would say, at this time. Kickboard enthusiast. I don't know. All right. Say goodnight, Kiki.
Oh, good night, Kiki. Say good night, Blair.
Good night, Blair. Good night, everybody.
Good night, everyone. We'll be back again next week, 8 p.m. Pacific time-ish. And that's on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitch, of course, if you're already here, but share it with your friends. And as always, be careful. Stay healthy if you can. Stay, stay great. You're great. Stay curious. And as Justin would say, stay lucky, because that's good too. See you later.